Hello everybody, this is Blue Tracks Deck. I am trying a completely new format today. This isn't going to be ye typical video. No trains running around, no episodes. I just felt like talking here because I'm actually right in the middle of editing some footage for The Secret Railway, and it's really boring and tedious, and I just need something to take my mind off of it, so I thought I'd talk. I don't know if podcast definitely isn't the right word for this, but it's going to be that style of, conversation today. I'm just going to talk about whatever kind of comes to mind. It won't be aimless, but I just want to kind of chat with you, as fans. Probably should do a live stream. If I had enough viewers, definitely would. That way you guys could send in topics and I could just pick them. But I know this show like the back of my hand, so I can find stuff. So today I think I'm gonna talk about. I could just talk about the TATMR parody that came out. Since everyone's doing one this year, I have voiced Henry for 3 Wooden Railway adaptations of the director's cut for Thomas and the Magic Railroad, and 5 other specials I've done Mr. Conductor, because those are 2 auditions that I put out 3 years ago, and apparently they were a huge hit. I don't know why that's so hard for me to believe, but it is. So apparently I'm a good Henry and I'm a good Mr. Conductor. So I've done their lines or various editions of it 5 times in the last 6 months. For everybody trying to do their... I think that's actually kind of great. I'm not trying to say this is annoying. It's kind of great that everybody wants to tribute to this monumental piece of media that was in the... not really even in the Thomas series, but, in the franchise. Kind of a royal mess theatrically, but I can't explain it either, my attachment to this movie. It's not great, but it's great. You know what I'm saying? It's probably 99% nostalgia and 1% the actual ideas that were in it. But I always think fondly of the Magic Railroad. It's just such a intriguing interpretation of the Thomas universe. You know what I'm saying? It's so out there that it kind of works. And honestly, I understand it more now than I did as a kid, because I didn't grow up watching Shining Time the way that they broadcasted it in the U.S. My first exposure to Thomas was a VHS tape in 1999. So by that point, Shining Time wasn't even airing anymore, and they had converted most of those episodes to just newer cassette, I can't believe I'm saying that, VHS tapes. I do remember, I got later on an old Shining Time VHS. They did make those briefly, but by the time I came around, it's so crazy to think about. The show was running in the 80s. Imagine running a show continuously from 1984 to now. Isn't that incredible? There aren't any shows that can say that almost. And with relative consistency, even as they transitioned into CGI, Thomas looks the same, proportionally. I'm surprised there was never a point where they rebooted just the style at all. Mostly, a show usually has to do that. I know there's been changes as far as within the model era, and definitely within the CGI era, but as far as just Thomas's aesthetic, he hasn't changed. The most transformative thing, other than the bouncing, which I don't really count as that's just an animation thing, is the rivets and all that. But Thomas's body never got longer or shorter or, actually E2 proportionate. And that's pretty great. Considering considering how long it's gone, how many different people have gone through the Thomas writing team, it's amazing how consistent the show is. And I'm using the term consistent very loosely. But anyway, back to Thomas and Magic Railroad. Now that I understand what Shining Time was to at least the U.S. side, and to Brit, because you gotta look at TATMR through a different lens. It's not a Thomas movie like Hero of the Rails or The Great Discovery was, where it was world building, introducing characters, at least purely. Thomas and the Magic Railroad was Brit's, Allcroft's. That was her. Everything that she put into bringing the show to life, bringing it to America, like, this was her love letter to that. I mean, think about when they made Thomas. The show had been running for 20 years. You know what I'm saying? It's already such a long time. The show itself has almost run for 40 years now. And that's just an incredible feat. I mean, it's kind of sad that there's not going to be a season 25, and it's also kind of great because it needs a break. They've clearly run out of ideas, and Mattel hasn't been handling it very well in the ever since they got rid of Brenner, you know. And so I think that is the right call to make, but also it's like, you guys have come so far. And, you know, maybe they'll just take a couple years off. I don't see the franchise, at least not yet, I don't see it just dying like that after all the trouble they went through to rebrand it. They're probably going to reboot it again, or it's probably going to get bought by another company, and they'll just go from there. But yeah, so when you look at the Magic Railroad that way, as opposed to, you know, it wasn't really her trying to say, oh, this is the island of Soda, or this is how the Reverend wanted it to be. Like, I'm tired of people getting mad about it. TATMR was probably just Brit's fan fiction, you know, and I don't know. I don't think that that's probably the best way to go for Thomas's first movie, but also think about it from her eyes. It's been running for 20 years. No show really runs for 20 years, so how much longer could the show go, right? In her mind, in the team's mind. I mean, little did they know, right? But, you know, it wasn't going to be a thing forever. So this was her chance to really bring that everything together and tie a nice little bow on her work. I mean, 20 years is a long time to dedicate to making a kids' television show. And we got to learn to think of it in that context. That's a lot of time. I mean, she produced 5 seasons of Thomas. And all the work, I mean, it wasn't just her, it was that whole team, but you know. So them bringing Shining Time into the movie universe makes sense to me now, and I can appreciate it more. I actually found some Shining Time episodes on YouTube and watched them. And that was kind of cool just to see what it was like, because I'd only seen Mr. Conductor or Alec Baldwin as Mr. Conductor until I found these. So I got to see when Ringo was narrating and George Carlin. I mean, George Carlin was my favorite narrator growing up for sure, but seeing them as Mr. Conductor, it's kind of like, oh, there's a little bit of its own lore, you know? And so it's actually kind of cool to build it in, because then there's like, yeah, the conductors and the Magic Railroad, all that's kind of weird, but being able to say, you know, every narrator's a conductor basically, and you could just imagine Michael Brandon wearing it. I mean, that'd be terrible, actually. Don't picture that. But, you know, they kind of built their own, like, Shining Time was its own thing. It was a show within a show is what Thomas was, you know. That was really kind of cool. I mean, I don't think it's a format that would do the show well nowadays. That's why it faded out. But it was still a great concept. And so the Magic Railroad was really just her saying goodbye to that and giving it a nice send-off. And I can't blame her for that. That's pretty beautiful if you ask me. So, all right, finally got this one done and exported. You wouldn't believe how tedious rather. I ain't complaining. But, yeah, so I didn't understand it as a kid. Honestly, the reason that I liked it so much growing up was Diesel 10 was obviously my favorite part of the movie, because, like, when you're a little boy, like I was just like, oh, you know, the mean, tough Diesel, that guy's cool. I never really thought of him as scary. think one of my little brothers did. I only had two at the time, but we would go to Blockbuster every week, and that was the movie I'd pick. And actually, my mom got so annoyed at it that I had to rotate it. So I would rent that one for the week, like 2 times in a row, and then I couldn't anymore. So I had to rotate between that one and Milo Notice. Those were the 2 movies that I would switch between. I obsessed over this movie. I mean, it was just so cool. The trains had their own voices, which was, such a shift from the narration style that I was used to. It had its own music. The sound effects were different. It was just stuff like that. And there's probably a phase where I had a crush on Lily, the girl in the show. But I mean, that was very brief. But I just liked it. It was just different from the other things, and I don't know, that's how kids are also. Maybe I was just obsessive. I always watched stuff like over and over and over. But yeah, when you really break it down though, like there was a lot of material to work with in there, and it could have been executed a lot better, as we saw. I can't believe Vinny and all the other people involved on the parody actually, they pulled it off. It was beautiful, I gotta say. Like, the filming, the camera quality just looked, I couldn't distinguish that from like being in the theater. I mean, you could, like the CGI effects, but like the footage itself was just insanely, like, it's crazy. Like, I remember when I first was on YouTube, and like Thomas YouTube had its own, like, or just YouTube in general, just had that homemade feel to it, which I kind of liked. And I swing one of 2 ways. I either like the extremely homemade vibe, not extremely, but pretty much like Miss Oliver Blossom level, and then I like this hyper professional, like if you're gonna try to make it look real, you might as well go all the way. And it was a masterpiece, and I can't believe it was like 3 hours long. And there was more that they had to cut. I mean, these people were extremely thorough. They're already talking about an extended cut, which I don't know if I'm going to watch that just because it's already 3 hours. Like, this is Lord of the Rings level dedication. And I mean, the fact that they did it in 4 years on, whatever budget YouTubers have. This is a project that a real movie studio would probably execute it in the same time frame. So I am just all props to them. I'm not trying to like go insane and like just be like, oh, they're perfect, but they did really well. They took the material, and I think they were good at judging what was good to bring in from the director's cut and what was good to maybe not, or to change to make the story stronger. Because even if you read the original scripts, the plot made more sense, but that doesn't mean it was better. Actually, the dialogue that Britt wrote was significantly worse than even what they released as the final film. Like, without Neil Crone, he rewrote a lot of the script before they finalized the movie, and without him, it would have just been so much more stilted. Because if most of you probably, if you're listening to this, you've read the May or August 1999 scripts, and they're just very matter of fact. They aren't as funny or witty as the final movie ended up being. But at least the major plot points were hit stronger, as far as like Lily and her family, and Burnett Stone's his problem. Like, he had a reason to be depressed, and then PT Boomer. See, that's an interesting one. I still think the weak point of the Magic Railroad is probably the villain thing, because there's no clear delineation, and I'm struggling with my own version of the Magic Railroad on this. There's no clear delineation of what, like, Boomer's not just the antagonist to Burnett Stone, and lady. Diesel 10 is just, he's out for the steam engines, but then he just ends up being a vehicle to, terrorize the lost engine. So that's why I rewrote it, that he already knows about her. Like, they're both trying to find her, but for separate reasons. Because that just makes more sense. I'm not saying it makes perfect sense, but it makes more sense than Diesel 10 just being angry and just happening to find the lost engine and being like, I'm going to chase them down over the viaduct with this man on my back, And so, I don't know. The ideas are there. It could be polished up, but like I said, the guys over at on Vinny's team, they nailed it, and the girls. Sorry, all of y'all did wonderful. If any of you are listening, probably not, but thorough applause. The part that I thought was, let's talk about Diesel 10 in the parody. It was a very interesting concept. I think it's definitely not the route I would take, but it would be for a different reason. It works in this parody because it starts in the late 60s, and so, I mean, this is just me being a geek, but, obviously artificial intelligence wouldn't really exist until now, right? If that. So, making Pinchy the actual villain, if I can use that term, the actual driving force to what makes Diesel 10, it only works because technically it's taking place in last year or this year. Because, if it was still when Diesel 10 was just being built, obviously it would have to be mechanical. And in the movie, it actually is, like, it doesn't it acts like it thinks on its own, but, well, actually, that's hard to break down. But, basically what they do in the parody is Diesel 10 he's not actually responsible for his actions, because his mind is, like, being controlled or mind-hived by the claw piece. Which, I mean, hey, it's an explanation. It leaves room for him having a redemption arc, either in that movie or if they decided to make a sequel. There's room for that. I think there's room for it even if Diesel 10 is truly evil. And I'll show why that's the case later on in my parody, because I set it in the same time period as the show. So obviously I'm not going to put artificial. Plus I'd be copying. That's their idea. And I don't want to see a bunch of other people start doing the same thing and trying to name Diesel 10 Will and all this stuff. No. Diesel 10 is Diesel 10. The way they did it is the way they did it. And it worked for their movie, and that's great. But that's not what I would do. But still respect. I also love how a lot of it's just taking the piss out of other parts. Like P.T. Boomer just has a scooter instead of a motorcycle. I'm sure half of it was budget reasons and half of it was like, oh, this would also just be funnier. So, I mean, hey, I'm down for that. I think that's great. I was really expecting to see more of P.T. Boomer, frankly. Because back when they were first releasing like parts of it at a time, he was a lot more present, it seemed. But then after the first 40 minutes, I don't know, Boomer just dropped off. And he didn't really become crucial to the plot. Like, his little backstory with Burnett and Tasha, that was great. None of that material was developed in any cut of the movie originally. That was much needed to really show you, why Boomer's mad at Burnett. Now, as Burnett Stone says in the parody, this has gotten way out of hand. Probably true. Probably true. I couldn't imagine dedicating 30 years of my life to revenge because somebody, stole my girl. Like, yeah, it sucks, but probably if that happens to you when you're like 17, by the time you're in college, you're not gonna care. Just from life experience. But it was still great for the movie, all right? That was the plot point. and that's how you make it mean something. And honestly, like the moment when they're on the mountain and Boomer's like, gonna exact his revenge by crashing Lady, that was surprisingly well acted. And the score, the soundtrack for this was amazing. I know Tynes and I think a couple other people composed specially for this parody, and it's so beautiful. It's crazy to me how many musicians there are in the Thomas fandom here, and they're professionally like able to do it. And a lot of them, like, they've come so far over the years, and selfishly I'm like, oh, it sucks that most of their good stuff is exclusive, but also I completely get it. Like, if you're that good at music, I understand, but like also if you're for hire, like, let me know, dude. I would be a paying customer. Not that I need a ton of exclusive music, but like if they sold them like albums, or like even if it was like there was a music pack like you could buy from some of these people like Tugster Intensifies or whatever, I'd be down for that sort of thing. But can't have it all. I'll just stick to the other free peeps because they do great too. Don't get it twisted. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what else did I like about that. There wasn't as much of the engines in it as I thought there would be, and I know that's why it was 3 hours long, because they had to develop not everybody. They didn't really develop the engines as much. Honestly, they added a few deleted scenes. Of course, they made them a lot more entertaining to watch by fixing the dialogue and whatnot. But there wasn't a whole lot of original train scenes. The exception being, of course, they threw Edward in there. I actually like that. It was a good nod, but it wasn't like other parodies where people are just trying to force Edward into the magic road because they think he should be there. He wasn't in the movie. And the reason isn't because they hated Edward. The reason is they couldn't really find a good place to put him. Or, and he was broken. But they didn't. They would have fixed him if it was that important. Like when James broke during the smelter scenes, they didn't write him out of the movie because of that. They had to make do and get it mended. So like it was cool. Like they nodded like, hey, Edward should be here, but he isn't. So they just gave him that one little scene, and I thought that was tasteful, So it was good to see. It was also neat the way they did other cameos. I haven't done that with mine just to kind of preserve I wanted to still feel like the movie. So I didn't want to put a bunch of characters who definitely didn't exist in when it came out. But I did like that they incorporated cameos from like characters that were introduced like through season 4 and 5. So like you'd see Oliver, Stepney, or Boko. So it felt still kind of like it was from that era. I know there are a couple that were newer than that, but I didn't notice it a whole lot. But yeah, most of the runtime to this was for Mr. Conductor and all his acid trips. Honestly, all of that was hilarious. I was thoroughly entertained. I've seen some complaining on Twitter about like, oh, I can't believe they're, making fun of drugs and alcohol, and get off your high horse. Okay, it was funny, and they're not even condoning it. You can laugh at something without condoning it. And, saying that people die from drugs is like saying, oh, well, people die from driving cars too, but we're going to not acknowledge that they exist. People die from train crashes. That might throw a wrench in things, considering we're all train fans here. But I thought it was funny. I mean, it was highly original. And honestly, it was kind of in keeping with the people. Like, if you think about Brit and that era, like, they all came out of the 60s, And they're all, friggin' hippies. They're coming to, making a kid's show. I mean, it's honestly right in tune with people like Ringo Starr. It was almost a tribute to them to make it that way. And, at the end, Mr. Conductor kind of realizes, hey, I need to get it together and stop with this. And he does. So that's a happy ending. What more could you ask for? So, yeah, I thought it was great. They actually gave him a lot more of an arc, which he needed. Because Mr. Conductor he's perfect, pretty much. Or this, ideal, perfectly polite guy in the entire movie, the real one. And he doesn't really have anything to learn. He's just kind of a plot device, He's there, he's running out of gold dust. Why does he need help? Well, because he's Mr. Conductor. Not because of anything else. He doesn't really have any other motivations other than to be really useful. He's acting like a train almost. Well, actually that's not fair. He could want to be really useful. That's fine. But I liked how, he was probably a little bit more nefarious than needed, but again, who cares? It's a parody. It's meant to be funny. And so I think they did well. The portrayal of C. Jr., that was great. It was funny. That was a little bit, I don't know. Vinny's clearly a genius. Sometimes his personality is a little, I don't know what the word is, snarky. I know he comes from a good place, and maybe that's just the way they act. I don't know. I'm not going to comment too much on that. It was still great. His accent was on point. There's a couple of moments where it was just just a little bit, like a mini cringe. But hey, honestly, that's probably everyone watching his stuff, me included. We're all a little bit cringe inside, so that's not really a knock on anything. Honestly, there's nothing that I can really think of that I would say was definitely a drawback or definitely stupid about the parody. They really took it seriously. They went through the animation to get it right. They put way too much work into this. If I could criticize it, I would say that. You guys worked way too hard on this parody, man. Freaking, they modeled these faces for it. They had someone just dedicated to animation, just dedicated to music. They remodeled the whole viaduct. And I think they even filmed on the viaduct from the movie, what was left of it. Isn't that crazy? Not to mention going to the Isle of Man, filming on location. How'd you find all those places? I would love to backpack to the Isle of Man just to see where they filmed the movie. Because that just looks so amazing. Imagine being there. It's so cool. And then, they even got Schemer from the actual show to come and do a post-credit scene. I don't even need to know how. That was just great. That was just hey, here's a little bit of you know what, you want a little bit of just a little cherry on top, right there. Boop. You got the real guy from the show, and it's all the more satisfying because he was the one, if you even knew the show, which again, I didn't, he was the one human character that didn't make it over to the movie. So it was just perfect. Just hey, it's kind of like when they threw Edward in there, hey, you should be here. You're not, but you should be. It was awesome. I'm glad they didn't try to fit him into the whole movie. It was just at the end, hey, there he is. Just perfectly undersold. I really liked the movie. It was great. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that stood out to me. It was a parody. It's funny. All good things to say. And I wonder if they're gonna make videos anymore after this. Because if it took me I would not take 4 years to make a movie. I'm just not that passionate. Kind of wish I was. But if I were to do that, I'd probably retire after. At least for a year. Just the non-stop effort that goes into that type of thing. I mean, my thing is always going to be kind of on the side. I have real stuff to do. So I could never really take the time to do that. But I'm really glad that they did. I mean, for the 20th anniversary of the movie. And, really the 75th anniversary of Thomas. Like, I couldn't ask for more. If I had to choose who did it better between Mattel's The Royal Engine and this, like, 1,000,000%. And it's kind of crazy. It goes to show, like, the fans put so much more into their content, and that's why I like it more. It's not even so much the production quality, although arguably that's getting so good that it compares to the show in some respect. But just the amount of creative talent that we have here is insane. Like, you have people who are really good at writing stories and dialogue. You have others who are just really good at the video animation and just set design piece. And then you have others who are really good at music. And I don't know. I really hope that some of these people get into producing on the real show one day, if that opportunity arises, because clearly they care about it enough to put in the effort that it takes to make it good, Like, that just seems to be missing. Like, Thomas has been hollow for a long time, honestly. The brief reprieve from that was when Andrew Brenner took over, and kind of, it felt like it was heartfelt again, and then it's like, I'm not going to rag too much on the current state of the show, because there's been other periods of it too where it just felt dry and like there was no life. Nobody really wanted to be there. They were writing episodes to get a certain number done, and same for like it was just so bland. Like, we always forget about seasons 8 through 12 were just so manufactured. Like, even now it's less hollow now than it was. But I'm digressing a little bit. If there were more people working on it who cared about it and who really appreciated quality, the show would be doing just fine. I mean, quality is what attracts people. I mean, people will watch anything. You could make Thomas appeal to an older audience if you wanted. I mean, clearly there's a market for it. And even if not, the only reason there's not a market for it is because they don't know that it could be good. You could make Thomas more complex if you wanted. It'd probably get weird, so it's probably best as a kid's show. And that sounds weird for me to be saying, but it's probably better that way. But you could at least make it at like a family level of a movie, like Toy Story, But anyways, yeah, I'd say that's about all I have to say about the Magic Railroad parody. It was super cool of you guys to do that, and I'm so proud. Well, I don't know, nothing to be proud about, but I'm happy that I was able to see it. I was able to watch it live and partake in that. I mean, it's really rare that you're able to come together with a group of people and enjoy something, especially right now, because we can't, go anywhere. And, it's hard to find a community that has the same eccentric interests as you. I haven't felt, that hype since last year when Avengers Endgame came out. And I was actually able to go with some friends and watch that. So this was a close second to that. Just being able to watch the chat roll go insane when certain scenes would hit. It was awesome. So yeah, anyway, I think I'm going to get back to work here, and I'll get back. I'll see you when I see you, okay? Hopefully the next video will be part 6. I just got to illustrate some scenes, and I got to film one section that I forgot earlier. So, all right, peace.